Haake. Garrett Haake, you're in the room. Bring to life some of the atmosphere. It felt to us watching like Devin Nunes was trying to out a whistleblower this morning. Was that the sense?
That was certainly the sense in the room. You could see Adam Schiff watching that line of questioning very closely. You could see Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's attorney jumping in there to shut that down. There were audible signs of discontent from the Republicans sitting in the room watching the hearing that line of questioning was shut down. And it really sort of stuffed out Devin Nunes' entire line of questioning. That was when he decided to hand things over to counsel going forward. To me, the other dynamic from being in the room that was so obvious was how much more comfortable Lieutenant Colonel Vindman got over the course of those 2 hours. His opening statement, he was very halting, referring to his papers over and over again. Then he, by the end of it, he's joking about his language proficiency. He is reminding Congressman Nunes of his military title, which got a lot of laughs in the room. And then joking just before we broke up for this brief recess here about remembering Rudy Giuliani only as New York City's finest mayor, as he said. And this is someone who I think settled into the moment here after being maybe a little bit starstruck by having to be in that room in this context this morning.
Garrett, what did it seem to you like Republicans were trying to do to Lieutenant Colonel Vindman? Because it seemed like they pursued a line of questioning trying to show him as somehow disgruntled. I mean, he just reads patriotic, dutiful, and by the book, and he seemed repelled by any effort to draw him into either side's political arguments.
Disgruntled and perhaps having dual loyalty. I was very curious how far the Republican counsel, Mr. Castor, was going to go on that line of questioning about Vindman being offered a job at the defense ministry in Ukraine. He seemed to walk just right up to the line of, it's pretty interesting that's a pretty big job for someone like you. Must have been a big honor. Who did you tell about it? What was it, were you worried about a conflict of interest when you came back? He did not go right out there and accuse Lieutenant Colonel Vindman of having any kind of secondary loyalty, but he left it just sort of sitting there for anyone who might want to pick up the baton and run with it when we go back. I would be very surprised. That is a very delicate thing for a member of Congress to touch, to a sitting active duty United States Lieutenant Colonel in that room when they come back. But boy, Castor left it just right there for anyone who wants to think about it in that way. It was a pretty interesting line of questioning.
Maya Wiley, I mean, let's just be blunt about this. It's a reprehensible line of questioning, but it is one that they were perhaps inspired by on some of the president's favorite programs. Laura Ingraham questioned John Yoo, a former very senior DOJ official, who suggested that Colonel Vindman, because he speaks Ukrainian and Russian, might be a spy. I mean, this is out there, and we should out it. This is the smear campaign against Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. It is active, it is live, and today it spilled out in this public hearing.
It is reprehensible, and I really appreciated, Nicole, you reading his actual opening statement where he said, Dad, you were not wrong to come here 40 years ago, meaning, what's implied in all this that hasn't been as explicit is he's Jewish. And at the time they fled the Soviet Union, Jews had extreme discrimination against them. They were fleeing persecution. Synagogues all over the United States had signs that said free Soviet Jewry. That's what he represents. And yet, he has to signal publicly that his father did not make a mistake in bringing him to the U.S. when he was 3 years old, and that wearing the U.S. uniform, I was a little surprised he didn't talk more. He's really understated his sacrifices for this country because he didn't talk about his Purple Heart. I thought more of that would come out.
Well, but if you know anyone in the military, Claire, I mean, active duty military, they are hardwired to not talk about their accomplishments on the battlefield. But we should say he is a Purple Heart recipient, and I'm going to stop saying this, but I'm constantly shocked by the bottomlessness of the Republicans' cravenness in trying to defend Donald Trump. This is an active duty military person sitting there in his uniform talking about his story, but it does not put any brakes in the system on the line of questioning clearly intended to insinuate that he has dual loyalties.
Yeah, and I think he's still walking around with shrapnel in his body.
Correct.
From his injuries at war, and he talked about his brothers all joining the military. What was fascinating to me is this counsel gently went there, will these members go there boldly? And how despicable will they be if they do? Because what I was interested in is the way he said, well, did you leave the door open to the offer of defense minister? And he said, no, I did not leave the door open. And then he said boldly and strongly, I am an American. And that phrase, I am an American, ought to ring really loudly in the ears of all these Republicans, because if they go there, if they actually try to turn this guy into somebody who cares about the Ukraine instead of the United States of America, then shame on them.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.